everyone to today's session of the webinar that aims to talk to the topic scaling in Africa, highlighting the commercialization journey. So allow me to give 2 minutes so that we all have everyone on the joining into today's session. And let me ask the participants to just do a round of introduction on the chat. Kindly just tell us perhaps your name. Obviously, we can see your name, but also where you're joining us from. Thank you very much. And then we'll start in 2 minutes. All right, allow us to start today's session. We're very excited that you're able to join us. Such a delight and honor to have you. Today's session will be talking about this innovator's journey as we try to scale in Africa. And we have amazing panelists. We have Ruth Mureithi, who's the Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship Management at Dedan Kimathi, and also has another hat of being the head of the Dedan Kimathi Science Park. So thank you very much. We're delighted to have you. We also have Deepak Maharaj, who's coming from Southern Africa, and he is the executive director for UV Bio, particularly and their purpose is to enable, and as an ecosystem enabler, perhaps enabling innovations to be scaled to the market with an interest on bio innovations. And obviously we have Sonia, who will be the moderator for the session. So karibuni sana, welcome very much. Allow me to go through the program brief. Allow me to share my screen. And then we'll be able to start shortly. All right. Again, welcome to this webinar. This webinar is hosted by Victoria Ventures in collaboration with Kenya National Innovation System, under the program called the Research to Commercialization Program, the R2C program. You'll hear us referring to it similarly. So like mentioned before, the program is implemented in collaboration with Kenya National Innovation Agency, whose mandate is really to develop and manage a national innovation system in Kenya that then enables taking ideas to market. And also Victoria Ventures is a management consulting firm that focuses on on getting the investors as well as getting the researchers ready for commercialization or to meet with the partners. Just to highlight the motivation for this project is, one of the main reasons is that research is done to respond to societal needs, right? But in more cases than the other, you find that the research then does not get to the market, which is a shame, because that was the purpose why people or the researchers went to do the research. So the point is that this good research, this amazing research makes it to the market, but also to replicate the growth that has been seen in the technology and innovation startup side of things. We'd also like to replicate that in the research-based innovation. And just to highlight the 2 main objectives of the project is, one, the project aims to strengthen the researchers' capacity by enabling them through taking them through an accelerator program that really prepares them for investment and commercialization, and just so that they're able to take their products to the market. And the second objective is to strengthen the institution's technology transfer capacity, because strengthening the researchers is one thing, because the researchers do exist in an institution. So by strengthening both the researchers' capacity as well as the institutional technology transfer capacity, we assume that will make a big win at the end of the day in matters commercialization. So the program is based on several pillars. The first one being an R2C accelerator program that targets to support researchers commercialize their products. And this entails trainings, and where we talk about, do they understand the innovation? Are they ready to scale up the innovation? How do they get funding for their innovations? And then we also have the element of the TOT training of trainers that is aimed at strengthening the institution's commercialization capacity. And we do, particularly for this cohort, we have 2 cohorts running through this year. We have the first cohort running from last month until August, and the second cohort running from August. And then we also are aware that there is perhaps a gender bias against female researchers. So we are working in partnership with Mawazo Institute to be able to support female researchers, particularly targeting 20 researchers. And then we also have webinars such as this one, and our target is to have 18 webinars, 6 webinars, particularly speaking to GESI, gender equity and social inclusion. And then we'll have a coaching element as as the last pillar of the program. Just to highlight a little bit about what the accelerator element of the program entails, it has 3 main elements. We have training, we have coaching, and direct linkages. So like we have, for this year, we are targeting 30 TOT, but also 40 researchers. And these researchers will undergo different trainings on different aspects, such as business modeling, pitching, investor readiness, etc. And then we also have the researchers going through a coaching exercise, and based on their specific needs, specific funding needs and specific partnership needs, we'll be able to link them with the right support. And then for the TOT, the cascaded training that is aimed to strengthen the institution, we also have 3 elements. And the first one is a training, and the first cohort already happened. So we have taken them through a training on how to run an R2C program within the institutions. And then there'll also be a coaching element of it on how to actually, really run this R2C program in the institutions. And then we'll also give them a toolkit that they can always refer to. And I think the last element is that we have the webinars, and this is our 4th webinar. And today we are talking about how do we scale in Africa from a Kenyan perspective and also from a Southern African perspective. But we have webinars coming every 3rd Thursday of every month. And just to introduce some of the first cohort researchers who we are working with, this cohort that started in January, we have Dr. Anne Carroll, whose innovation is about a biodigester and a biocatalyst. We have Professor Paul Ntakanyo with a unique fertilizer. We have Dr. Gerald Bugwa, who has a water treatment facility. And we have Professor Duncan, whose innovation is a solar dryer. We also have Professor Romano, whose product is aimed at controlling pathogens in crops. We have Peter Kirui, who has a solution for aflatoxins. We have Dr. Rose Ramkat, who has a solution called edible biopreservative that extends the shelf life of food. And we have Paul Kimurto, who has a groundnut variety as his innovation. Like I mentioned, we do training. We're training 30 TOT. We're training 40 researchers and working with them. We are going to have linkages and partnerships to be able to fund some of these projects, some of these innovations. And then there's a webinar that aims to disseminate knowledge. For more information, you can write to us on r2c@victoria.co.ke or follow us on all our social media platforms, Victoria Ventures, as well as Kenya National Innovation Agency. So thank you very, very much. Today, allow me to stop sharing and immediately invite Sonia for the discussion for today.
Thank you, Maureen. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this discussion. It promises to be interesting. As we go, please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and Maureen and I will pick them up to make sure that we are responding to your questions. Please put in additional comments of your experience based on the topic of discussion today. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce to you the speakers for today. Maureen introduced them briefly, but I'd like to ask Ruth. Maureen introduced you to us as the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship Management at Dedan Kimathi Science and Technology Park at the same university, Dedan Kimathi University, but I'm aware that you do other things. Tell us about the other things that you do in this innovation space.
Thank you, Sonia. As you've rightly heard it, my name is Ruth Mureithi, and apart from being the Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship Management, I also I'm in charge of the Dedan Kimathi Science and Technology Park, and this is a national government project that aims at bringing together the industry, government, and academia to work together. And so aside being supporting the innovations and research to scaling up to commercialization, we are also looking at creating the right partnerships for innovations to thrive. So Thank you so much, Sonia. I know we shall interact more.
An important thing I learned about you, Ruth, is that you are part of the team that won the bid to host the International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation in Kenya in 2024. Is that right?
Yes, Sonia, you're right.
Congratulations to you and to us. So that should be exciting for those who are in this room to attend, and for many more on the continent.
Yes, it is.
Deepak, welcome to Nairobi. This is where we are at. First, beginning with, have you been part of this World Conference on Science Parks and Areas of Innovation? And we were introduced to you as a CEO of a company that you started during COVID. What is it that you do, Deepak?
Yeah, so I do multiple things. So I'm going to try to focus on what's relevant here. So I, at the moment, am the executive head of a company called Uvu Bio, which is a biotechnology or bioeconomy ecosystem enabler. We focus largely on helping entrepreneurs, startups, researchers to take their ideas to the market. And we do that through various different mechanisms, but one of the key mechanisms is we make our open access laboratory available to these researchers to refine their concepts. Our lab is the only open access facility on the African continent, where we have a very high-tech, well-kitted out laboratory in Cape Town that is made available to these businesses. Now, this is something that if you're not at a university, you wouldn't have access to, which means that researchers are then bound to stay within a university context to ensure that they can progress their products further. But that comes with some limitations, especially from an IP perspective, because as long as you're within the university education system and the research system, you share that intellectual property with the university. And most researchers and entrepreneurs want to move away from that. And that type of environment is provided by WIMI. With regards to myself, sorry, I just want to close on this one. With myself, I've been a researcher that developed technologies and took them to the markets myself, and done that for the first 25 years of my career. And for the last 5 years, I've been focusing on helping businesses get there.
Just picking up from there quickly, Deepak, what does that journey typically look like from ideation all the way to commercialization? What are the key steps? What are the key milestones for someone either embarking on this journey or is in this journey and isn't quite clear where in the journey they are?
Yeah, so it's I can tell you it comes with a lot of highs and a lot of lows. There's
But
more lows.
the steps first.
Sorry?
That's the key steps. We'll get to the challenges and highs and lows in a moment.
So the early stage is obviously identifying your idea and your concept. Typically that comes out of a university program, maybe a master's or some feedback. I think maybe if the two of you could maybe turn off just mute your mics. Yeah, that would be better. Yeah, so it starts with obviously an idea that typically comes out of a master's or a PhD program. And then it's about trying to progress that to a proof of concept. That proof of concept is a critical stage because that will actually start unlocking potential investment. Now, the next is then to scale and develop. So your proof of concept will get you your first generation prototype, but then you need to start at least moving into a laboratory scale. So, trying to get production or demonstration at a larger volume. This is not, huge scale at this point in time, but that's where you start improving the mechanism in which you want to produce your product. So you want to refine the various parameters to ensure that you get higher yields. And then the next stage is now you want to start producing some market entry samples. And that's from a technology perspective. It's essentially known as the piloting phase, where you will then start producing some market entry samples and start testing the market. And that would be through various mechanisms of getting free test samples out there, but also there's mechanisms of you to sell these samples to potential clients. But the important point of that phase of the business is that it's an iterative process. Is that how do you want to test the market and get that feedback so that you refine that. So this entire cycle of getting product to the market is an iterative one. It's very important that anybody trying to get a product to the market is you stay very close to the market and you listen to what the market says. It's important not to try and think you're going to develop a product in isolation and push it into the market. That is where most failures happen. Always test whether the market wants what you deliver. And thereafter is the real scaling part, is about then securing the key investments, getting investors excited about your idea so that you can then start building your own facility. If a toll production facility is not available, then you would obviously have to take that bold step of building your own. But if there is, that gives you an additional scaling step where you can get it done in somebody else's facility while you build capital to get to your stage. I hope that in a nutshell explains that process.
Yes, it does. Ruth, what would you add, or do we do things differently here in terms of that journey from ideation to commercialization?
We don't do it differently, but maybe what I would look at, because this is basically the ecosystem that we are trying to build as an area of innovation and in the endeavor to transform Kenya into a knowledge economy, is the fact that we don't stop at commercialization. Immediately you commercialize, you have to think about growth and scaling up. Because some of the handles that we've had is innovators getting to commercialization and then they get comfortable, they think that's all. So you have to think about the growth of your company, the growth of your products, and also how do you scale them up? Because this will help you in gaining traction in the market. So that is the addition maybe I felt like I needed to add to the PAC's process.
Well, maybe there's one or two people like me. When you say commercialization, to my mind, it means we've gone to market, we are producing to scale, it's okay. So this addition that you've added makes me ask, what does commercialization mean if it's not the end of my process?
Thank you, Sonia. when you think about the process of from research to commercialization or ideation to commercialization, you're thinking about developing an idea, then you further develop a prototype, you go to testing, then you look for funding, because I think part of what is very important in this process is getting resources in terms of funding for your product or service. Then by the time you're getting to commercialization, I break it down into a few items. I take it as commercialization involves marketing, you push your product to the market. Then you think about sales, distribution of the product or service to customers. So, for instance, Sonia, if you're an innovator and you get to a point and you have channels of distribution for your growth, is that you may diversify. You may continue adding product or service. You may diversify in terms of your market niche. You go to you penetrate more markets. That is what I mean by scaling up. Back to you, Sonia.
Thank you for unpacking that and clarifying it for me. I'll go to the next discussion point about opportunities and obstacles. So, many here are researchers. They've encountered some during their journey and their process. But I'll ask you, Ruth, perhaps to give us, particularly with the lens about young researchers and women, what are some of the opportunities that exist for them? What are some of the obstacles that are encountered during this commercialization journey? So in general, but particularly, have you seen some that are faced by young researchers or by female researchers? Ruth?
Thank you. Yeah, I quickly look at some of the obstacles that there are in. Yes, Sonia, I hope you can hear me.
Perhaps
I go quickly to the
struggling. Ruth, we're struggling to hear you. Could you check on your connection?
Innovation to commercialization in the introduction. He said that you must. Is it? Can you hear me now?
Yes, just proceed and then we'll move. But it's really poor. Ruth, could you check your connection again, please? We are struggling to hear you. And as you do that, I'll invite Deepak. Same question. What obstacles have you seen?
Am I?
No. No.
No.
Let me try while Ruth gets her connection sorted. So the innovator's journey is full with highs and lows, and a lot of these the opportunities lie. It's very regional specific. It depends on what the market is interested in and what the market is excited about. Now, I can give you an example for South Africa, for example. I'm going to try to respond to the woman question, although I can't speak with any authority because I'm not a woman myself. But the businesses that we do incubate, a lot of them are female-owned. So South Africa has created a large number of opportunities specifically for women-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of dedicated programs that look at supporting women-owned businesses because of our historic mismatch between gender. So I think it's less of a hurdle at this point in time. There's a lot of opportunities for funding and for entrance into specific programs because of the focus from a gender perspective. The obstacles, and this is now I'm speaking in general for all researchers, it's very much dependent on what the available resources are. So although South Africa has got a developing bioeconomy, and we have created a huge impetus and focus on developing our bioeconomy and supporting biotech researchers, there isn't enough venture investment funds that focus on this. In fact, there's only one dedicated biotech venture capital fund in South Africa, and it's a very small fund. So accessing investment is a hurdle to a large extent. The other thing is accessing suitable infrastructure. As mentioned, we are in a unique position in that we are the only open access lab in the continent, but the continent is huge. Aside from the continent being huge, the country is huge. We have only one lab in the Western Cape. So that itself is a huge obstacle because we can only reach people within the Western Cape region of South Africa. And we have still a very big country that is left unsupported from an infrastructure perspective. So we're filling a very small gap and we plan to scale, but at the moment we're filling a small gap. The next gap that still exists, and we plan to get there, but we don't have the investment to get there, is around creating a toll production or scaling facility where you can go to larger scales. Because the lack of investment is a huge hurdle. So you get technologies that move to an appropriate lab scale very quickly, but don't have the infrastructure available to get to the next stage. So that's another. And I urge the participants to go and look up the Gartner's hype cycle, because another hurdle is researchers themselves that become their own obstacle, and largely because of an overinflated sense of expectation. And that's why I say you need to go and look at the Gartner's hype cycle, because what happens is that researchers are very excited. And being a scientist myself, I know this firsthand, is that we get very excited with an idea. And we tend to believe that that idea has more value than it actually does. And that overinflated sense of expectation creates a point of inflection that has detrimental effects on the journey of the project. And one of my key roles as a mentor when I'm mentoring some of the businesses is to be that voice of reason and be that person that asks them the difficult questions that they don't want to ask themselves. Because that would help you a lot more than surrounding yourself by people that just say, tell you what you want to hear. You need to ask yourself this very difficult question. Because after the point of inflated expectations is a trough of disillusionment. That's where a lot of businesses actually fail, because they can't dig themselves out of that. You need to stay the length of that course to be able to dig yourself out of that trough of disillusionment. So touched on various different aspects there.
One question Peter Mbugo asks is around IPs for Innovator. Have you seen that are there better rules and regulations for IPs for innovators, or is it still an obstacle that they face?
So one thing that South Africa has done very well is that they've created a specific law that protects the intellectual property. It's the Intellectual Protection Act of South Africa. So I'm not sure if similar things are available in Kenya, but this is very clear that researchers that develop the technology.
Please mute, Bruce, please mute.
Researchers that develop the technology, whether they're within the company setting, whether they're within the university setting, have a right to the intellectual property. So if you develop it, or if you develop it in conjunction with others, you own the technology. However, when you in the basis of doing it in an environment like a university or like a company, you don't own the intellectual property entirely. So there are some laws that do protect it. It does not take away from the fact that you need to put protection mechanisms in place. Patenting is always an option, but it's not the only way to protect your intellectual property. There's various other mechanisms. And I think that's a topic on its own right. And
Yeah.
I would, Sonia, I can recommend a few speakers that you could probably invite to give you, the participants an overview on IP protection mechanisms.
Last question on IP, because it's not the focus on this. I was in a session with innovators, and it was the question of at what point are you discussing this intellectual property and rights? Is it at the beginning? Is it at the point where you've done proof of concept? Is it when you're going to market and securing investment? What's ideal?
Yeah, when you're at the market, it's too late to discuss your intellectual property. You actually have to do it at a very early stage, especially when you're doing it in a partnership. So during my days of research, when I was working for a research organization, we used to work with multiple different parties. And the first thing that we did is discuss on a potential split. You discuss who's coming with their background intellectual property and how you're going to share the foreground intellectual property. Because trying to negotiate that after you've developed something is going to be a fight that nobody wants to have.
Okay. Ruth, back to you. I hope the connection issue is resolved. In your time in this ecosystem, what have you seen as the key success factors that enable innovators in Kenya or on the continent to scale their ideas, their products successfully?
Hope now you can hear me.
Yes, much better.
Thank you. So I look at the opportunities for our innovators in a broader perspective and also in an African setup. So in a broader perspective, I think there is a lot of focus that is now being directed towards this process, from ideation to commercialization. And part of the reason is I go back to what you introduced our participants to, that winning a bid to host the International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation in Kenya is not a small thing. This poses a very big opportunity for our innovators to network. So this is a big networking opportunity for our innovators, and this was not there before. So it's a big opportunity that I pray and hope that our innovators will be able to seize. Secondly, there is funding, access to capital. So on board to fund or to offer investors, we have venture capitalists, we have an ecosystem that is ready and willing to support our innovators. I see that as a great opportunity. Then we have government policies. I look at, for instance, in Kenya, what an agency is doing, and now our innovators have a space in government. There before, we were having a serious handles, regulatory handles. So whenever you want to move with your product and push it to the market, you would take quite some time because of these regulatory handles. But now, with the likes of Kenya doing what they are doing, and also opening up people through such webinars on the need for innovation, we cannot talk about being ready for the fourth industrial revolution if you're not able to offer the right infrastructure for innovations. So back to you, Sonia.
Okay, Bruce, those who are in the Dedan Kimathi space, have there been researchers that you've worked with who've taken their product to market and scaled?
Exactly.
What would you say worked? What is it they did that made it work?
Yes.
What are the key things you see as key success factors?
I look at the research and development dichotomy in the university. I know the practice in Africa has been that research and innovations have taken place in the public sector, that is in the universities. And that is why I think Deepak initially stated that we are now moving from the compliance research that is done in universities. because we realize if we have to have research that goes all the way to commercialization and that defeats the market, then we have to align to what the industry wants. We have to solve existing industrial or business problems. So one of the things that have really worked well for us is that we have the laid down ecosystem. We have industries on board now through the Science and Technology Park. We have industries working within the park. So there is that interaction between academia and industry, and therefore it has become easy to push some of the innovations and products to the market, because even at the ideation stage, you're working towards solving existing industrial problems.
Okay.
Back to
Deepak, on your end, what are the things, and here you implied some of the obstacles are researchers themselves, but for their own success, what have you seen researchers do to achieve that success?
The one thing that I've seen repeatedly is the personality of the researcher is critical, and the perseverance, because as mentioned, you're going to have many obstacles, but you need to be able to persevere through that. And having an appropriate mentor is another key success factor, and having a supportive ecosystem.
Support.
So a supportive ecosystem.
Okay.
That you are part of, whether that is the university, whether that's in the context of an incubator, but you need to have people that are there to support you in various aspects. The critical component that is lacking, especially in a researcher, is the business components of it. We all trained as scientists, that's our passion, but to get a product to the market, you need a business person. In fact, your science becomes less of a focus as you scale, rather than a business person. So that business mentor is a critical component. And that's where business incubation is an important cluster creation benefit, because it brings together various different entities that support the business to get to the market.
And I hear that's what Ruth is saying is offered here as, you know, the interaction between academia and industry within the business parks. In the university setup in particular. There is a question that Frank raised very early in this discussion, which I think is relevant to where we are going now. And Frank asked, what would be your advice? And this I'll put to both Deepak and Ruth, for those looking to access specifically a biological lab incubator in the continent. And I think, Deepak, this was when you were introducing yourself. And in general, how to advise policymakers to set up an incubator for biotechnology. So Deepak, I'll let you go first, and then Ruth, you'll follow based on, you know, what's happening in Kenya.
Yeah, so I think, you know, in South Africa, because we identified biotech as a key growth area, and I think it's going to be the same with Kenya and all of Africa, especially on the back of COVID. Our vaccine goals, etc., has created more opportunity for biotech to grow on the continent. So on the back of that, each government needs to have a dedicated plan on how to support that growth industry. And one of those is to create an ecosystem or a cluster of benefits that is going to help grow this industry, which means, and it's part of, you know, the triangle of bringing together key stakeholders that are investors, academia, current industry, etc. Bring them together in an ecosystem. And I think what Ruth is doing through the Science Park concept, that is the foundations on what a cluster is built. The one thing that's lacking is an open access lab. And, you know, we spotted that gap in 2019, which I believe was a bit late. To have that type of facility available on an open access, because there's no links of IP, you don't have risk of IP sharing, and as you know, this is what we do, but we typically want the entity that's providing this service not to be interested or focused on taking equity. It might be an option to take equity, but you must give in return to get equity. So just by virtue of sitting in the facility, you don't give away equity. So these are key components to enable the growth of a sector. Understand that biotech is nascent in the African context, which means that you have to provide a lot of hand-holding through an incubator that is suitably resourced, which means that there has to be investment. There has to be investment. And unfortunately, that startup investment has to come from the government. And most African governments are cash-strapped. But you need that startup investment to come from the government because it's a risky phase for private sector to invest. But when government invests, you can solicit private sector investment that will help this institute grow. But for me, the provision of an open access lab and then a toll production facility, together with a strong mentorship network and the provision of a skills development option within this incubator. Because as you're growing your business, you're going to need to skill that business, to resource that business with skilled people. And unfortunately,
please. I'm sorry. I want to jump to Ruth to answer that specific question. There's incubation for different things, and here digital is quite high and quite strong. So when it comes to biotechnology labs, and I think COVID was a big trigger for those of us who are not in the science around, we have KEMRI, but is that enough? Deepak talks about open access, is that enough? So what's happening in terms of what can be done to influence more an incubator that's about biotechnology? And Ruth.
Thank you so much, Sonia, because one of the thematic is the National Science and Technology.
We have lost Ruth again. Yes, we've lost Ruth.
Is food value innovations.
Okay.
Sonia, you can hear me?
We lost you completely at some point, but try again. Ruth, a suggestion, if you turn off your video, maybe something will change. Okay, two questions are here as we wait to see if Ruth can come back on. Deepak, one question. What around how to organize their space as researchers? So let me just read it as it's written. Should researchers try to be a business person? Should they get a co-founder who helps with that? What makes a good researcher who moves on to become an entrepreneur? And I think that speaks to your personal experience, the last part of that question. And then there's a second question by Levi around funding. Is the prevailing culture of preferring already successful ventures and innovations helpful? If so, what makes accelerators and incubators any different from commercial banks? Let
me answer the last question first. So yeah, very, very true. There's an aversion to risky technologies or risky ventures. Unfortunately, the banks and major investments in Africa are risk averse. So it's unlikely that that's going to change anytime soon, but we're hoping that it will. Incubators and accelerators are meant to actually help support these businesses de-risk available for investment by other businesses. So I think, you know, that is the key component that is lacking, is to have a venture fund that is open to risky investment. Unfortunately, we don't have that in South Africa, and I doubt there's many available in Africa. So it's a point that I don't have any mitigation criteria at the moment, but it's something that exists and we're aware of. But the accelerators do support, and they are, you know, the accelerators get funding from some philanthropic organization that supports a handful of businesses through some investment, and that is risky-based investment. And that, unfortunately, there's too few of them. But if we can tap into more philanthropic investments that can support businesses through an acceleration program, we will realize a lot more going to the market. Then, Sonia, just to reiterate, state your first question again. It's about.
The first question is around researcher to entrepreneur. So what is advisable? Does the researcher get somebody with the skills onto the team? Do they have a co-founder on the team? What makes a good researcher a good entrepreneur? So there's several parts to that question.
Yeah, and there is no right answer to that, because we have businesses in our portfolio that have done it both ways, and they are successful, and have done it both ways that were also not successful. So I think it's very much dependent on the founder himself. It's important that a scientist develops some level of business skills for their own benefit, because they need to understand how the business cycle works. So that they if they do bring in a co-founder, they are still in sync with what is required from a business perspective. We have seen that many of the researchers bring in a co-founder that has business expertise or business training, and there is value in that, because that allows the researcher to focus on the science. Because in the early stage, you need to have a core focus on both aspects. Because if it's one person that's trying to focus on business and trying to develop that science to entice investments, you might struggle. And so there is benefit in bringing in, a co-founder that focuses on the business aspect. And typically, we think that should be an economist or a chartered accountant, but it doesn't limit. It can be somebody with no qualifications, but has experience in taking business to market. The other aspect of where I still believe that all scientists need to build some business skills. This was something that I myself personally did. I decided as a concerted effort after 25 years of being a scientist to go and dedicate 2 years of my life to go and learn business through an MBA. I'm not saying everybody needs to go and do an MBA, but do spend some of your energy reading up on business articles so that you can equate you can update your skills from that perspective. That way, nobody can take you for a ride because you understand it. You don't need to be an expert in it, but you understand.
Okay. We are quickly running out of time. Deepak, if you can see the Q&A section, there's a question there to you by Edwin Kimite. If you could just begin to type that out as I cross over to Ruth and just check in with her around, the policymaker question and how they support innovations, laboratories, and how accelerators are different from banks and incubators. Ruth?
Sorry, Sonia, I'm missing this one. From who?
From Edwin Kimite, not in the chat, in the Q&A section.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Ruth?
Thank you, Sonia. From a policy perspective, I think now we have regulations that are more favorable to innovations. And I look at the way an accelerator should run, and I give an example of what we are doing in Dedan Kimathi. You realize that, for instance, in Kenya, our financial institutions have lagged. They are so, they see like innovations are a risky business to invest in terms of even giving capital to the innovators. And so when we learned this, we decided to have our own, in our accelerator, we decided to have our own way of supporting the innovations through seed funding. So I can say that these are some of the policies that have been aligned to support innovators, and the seed funding given through an accelerator is very different from the finances that somebody accesses from a financial institution, because in a financial institution, they will only consider you when you are at commercialization level. In an accelerator, once you're put through the accelerator program, then you're eligible for the seed funding. So,
can anyone come to the Kimathi as a researcher, to join the accelerator program?
Yes.
Okay. It's open, easy, criteria is clear?
Yes, our accelerator program is open.
Okay.
We have an eligibility criteria which is well defined.
Okay.
And Sonia, maybe just to add, this is done because the park is not a Dedan Kimathi facility. It is a national government facility open to all.
Okay.
So the accelerator program admits any researcher, any innovator from any part of the country and beyond.
And there was the specific question by Frank: how can we convince government to open a specific biotechnology lab incubator?
I think it's not hard. I look at the state agencies charged with a mandate of innovations like Kenya. I think with the kind of sensitization that we are having, it may not be a big thing. It's just a matter of aligning whatever the program will be like, and then it is now with the kind of focus that the country has towards transforming into a knowledge-based economy. I think it is not a big deal having the right policies in place and the establishment of the same.
Frank, I hear lobbying is needed for this and that it is possible for it to happen.
Exactly. And now that, maybe Sonia, if you allow me, now that we shall be hosting the World Conference for International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation, this has been taken up by the government, so the lobbying may not be allowed. Because okay, the only way to transform from an agricultural economy producing raw products for export to a knowledge-based economy that we are able to produce knowledge products is through innovations.
Okay, so I have been reminded I have 2 minutes. I would like to ask you, Ruth, and then Deepak shortly after you, to just in summary say in terms of the innovator journey, scaling from research to commercialization, what should be the key takeaway for those in the journey from you?
Thank you, Sonia. Resilience is very important. It's very important for any innovator in this journey, at whatever step in the journey, to hold on and believe in the dream. Be passionate about the idea until you get to commercialization. Thank you.
All right, Deepak.
Thanks. I think it was an interesting conversation. So from my perspective, very much agree with Ruth. Stay to the journey, be true to your idea, but don't overinflate your expectations. Ask yourself the difficult questions. If you're a researcher, you are skilled in the art, don't skew your views to fit your concept. If you see that it's not working, pick a different idea. Failure is good. Don't be afraid of failure. But you learn from every failure and you fail fast. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both for your time and sharing your insights. It's particularly interesting to hear from a very South African context and from a Kenyan academic context, and there aren't too many differences. The process of the journey is the idea, proof of concept, production, where you then begin to produce by volumes, market sampling, securing investment, and then production and growth and scale up. That's what you've both said to us in terms of what the journey looks like from the idea to commercialization. And commercialization necessarily involves marketing, sales, distribution, value addition. And to get there, the team needs to be constituted in a way that makes that possible. So whether both protecting your idea with the IP, intellectual property, but as well as having on your team somebody who looks at your idea and your product from a very commercial point of view. Can it be the same person? Would it be the researcher? Deepak, I heard you say not necessarily. It might be not preferably, but having, as a researcher, having some idea about how the market works. We talked about opportunities and obstacles, looking at the lens of, are there more opportunities now than before? Yes, there is more funding, there is more networks, there is more laws and more recognition by state actors about the importance of this space and this ecosystem in Africa. And therefore, there's many, many more opportunities now than there's been in the past. And the obstacles are many, both in terms of resources, as well as on the part of the researchers themselves. I like this an overinflated sense of expectations where, your product is the best thing ever. I guess you would say since sliced bread, and, having a point where there's a reality check to that. And what you said just right at the end is failure is part of the process, and learning from it is the most important part of that process. And I think in building the collaborations and the networks that the ecosystem allows for now is the way for researchers to move into collaboration. And here in Kenya, there's various incubators. There's Kenya, who is in partnership, in this project in Kenya that is about pushing and supporting researchers into that journey, through that journey to commercialization. So I'll say thank you to all. We've tried to respond to all the questions. If we didn't, please feel free to write. We'll ask the panelists to send their responses, particularly to Ruth. Where possible, let us know in the chat where we can get more information about the Dedan Kimathi Park. Let's see, the procedure of the accelerator program. Please do that. Thank you all, and I will hand this back to Maureen.
I think around...
Apologies, there's an invitation there from Deepak. If you reach out to him on LinkedIn, he'll engage where possible. So your questions around funding, your question about biotech labs, he will address. All right, I'm over and out.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Sonia. Thank you very, very much, Deepak, as well as Ruth. I think a round of applause for you all for really enlightening us on how do we then scale these innovations to market within the African context. I particularly liked the way we were delineating what the government should do and what the researchers should do, particularly in terms for the government, where we have to talk about policies, we have to talk about processes, we have to talk about structure, we have to talk about infrastructure. But then also now for the researchers, I think one of the panelists talked about, the soft skills resilience. Then there's also the element of working as a team. Then there's also the element of, perhaps networking and knowing where to get the available resources. So, and also, I think one last thing is, I think it's also interesting for us to know that Kenya will be hosting the International Association of Science Parks next year in 2024. So we're all getting our boots ready to lobby where necessary, to talk to whoever needs to be spoken to be able to move in the same direction. So allow me to make the final announcement that we do have these webinars every third Thursday of every month. So we have an upcoming webinar that's scheduled for the 20th of April, and the topic is product market fit. How do you ensure that your innovation is fit to the market? So thank you very, very much. It's the top of the hour. I appreciate you all, and God bless you, and have an amazing rest of the week.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for having me. Cheers. Bye.